Hi, it's Dr. Parikh. How do you use feedback to grow as a writer? We've talked about this a little bit throughout the semester. But the biggest part of using feedback is being open. And I've talked before about how common it is to have pretty strong emotional reactions to feedback. It's hard to take criticism, especially on something you've worked on really hard. And usually you don't realize how important a thing is. So for example, topic sentences is something that I had professors give me a lot of feedback on. And I didn't think it really mattered that much. If I thought it mattered, I would have done it right to begin with. And over time, I've realized how much of a difference it makes. For me, that's really settled in from editing other people's papers. Usually for me, it's my husband. That's the person I do the most pure editing with, both ways. And I realize how confusing it is to read his work when there's not a title, when there's not a topic sentence yet. And so it's kind of like, all right, I have to decipher what this paragraph is about. And often, just like I do, his last sentence of the paragraph would make a lovely topic sentence. So be open to things that you don't think are important yet, especially if you repeatedly get that feedback. I've talked about how my husband would tell me something wasn't clear and I'd say, oh, you're just not reading it right. And then other people would tell me that same section wasn't clear. So when multiple people are giving you the same feedback, they're probably not wrong. So part of it is just being humble and open, which is part of the scientific attitude that we talk about in Gen Psych 1, with being, open to following the data. If the data says that you need to change something about your writing style, you probably need to change something about your writing style. Another part of growing from feedback is just paying attention to it. So taking it seriously, reading it. You get a ton of feedback in this course. Every assignment, you get this huge rubric. You get comments. You're constantly getting feedback in the reading group. And so just taking the time to go through it all and writing some of it down, because this course may not be accessible after this semester. And so you want to keep track of it. And that's part of why I have you do an assignment where you actually say, okay, what are the things that I need to check for when I'm editing a paper? Other ways to use feedback to grow as a writer is I'm really just kind of combining those ideas to actually, when you write, know that you need to check for certain things. For example, I almost always, when I start giving an example, I start with a singular noun, like a student, and then I run into the his, hers, theirs, like he, she, they, and I go, crap. And then I go back and I turn it plural. I say students, because that's so much easier to use as an example, because I don't have to mess with he, she. I can just choose they from then on out, but I almost always forget to do it. Similarly, I have to check myself before I wreck myself with topic sentences. So even though I am very strong on you guys about these things, it doesn't mean that they're easy for me or that I'm perfect at them, but it means that I check kind of obsessively for these things. I notice as soon as I run into an issue with, do I use he or she? I say, wait, can I possibly do this as a plural just to save time? And I have to go back and change it, sometimes for a few sentences. And topic sentences are another big one. I have to go back and check. Make sure that I've written a good broad topic sentence for each paragraph. And often it's easiest for me to just do that at the end. In this case, you were outlining a lot, so I kind of pushed you to do it at the beginning as your plan for what the paragraph was about. But you may have to update it by the time you're finished with the actual paragraph, because you may have switched sort of where you were going with that paragraph by the time you got all your details in. The last way to keep growing as a writer with feedback is to not stop trying to get feedback. Even when you are done with school and you're in your career, almost anything you do in the world is going to take a lot of paperwork, a lot of writing. If nothing else, email communication is huge and is really tough to do well. I struggle because I tend to get too detail-oriented, and my emails end up being really long, so I always struggle to say, okay, what's really necessary here? But no matter what your job is, especially any job in psychology, is probably going to involve documenting things, writing down what happened. And if you work as any sort of counselor or clinician, Your case notes are legal documents. A judge could call them in and treat them as legal documents that you have signed your name to. So it's incredibly important to A, be clear and accurate, B, include the right amount of information because you don't want all the details of your client's life just sitting there in a record that a judge could subpoena. And C, follow, whatever rules you have for getting reimbursed through insurance. And so I know not all of you want to become clinicians, but a lot of you do. And writing is essential for that. But even if you work in human resources, in a group home, in a lab, most of the jobs you can do with a bachelor's in psychology require you to write and explain things to people in writing. And so don't stop seeking feedback. Keep asking your supervisor and the people who get your memos, like, was that clear? Is there something I can do to make my writing better? How can I keep growing? So definitely throughout school, but even after school, when you don't have grades per se, still seek to do the best job you can with things. And still, the last way to keep growing as a writer, I may have said last a few times already, but one of the last things I'll say is see what other people do. Try to grow from them. And try to find people whose style complements yours and see if you can work on some joint projects, because that can really help you learn how to take the best of what they do into your writing. You can't, you're always going to be your own writer. You can't be exactly like someone else, but you can learn how to adapt and be a better version of you by thinking about what other people do well, what you appreciate as a reader. Thanks. Bye.